In the 15th century, there was a ruler named Vlad the Impaler. He was known for having his enemies violently impaled on long stakes. He would be forever immortalized by Irish author Bram Stoker in his masterpiece, Dracula. It may have not been a hit when it came out, but nowadays it's considered a literary classic. Because of this, Dracula's become the most famous vampire of all time, which means he has plenty of movies. With the new Dracula movie coming out soon, I felt like it was time to review some Dracula movies. But Dracula's the most recurring character of all time, so I have to narrow this list down a lot. First rule, the movie has to be theatrically released, so no direct-to-video movies. The second rule is that it has to be based off or related to the Bram Stoker novel. So here's my review on some of the Dracula movies. Technically the first Dracula movie ever made was Dracula's Death in 1921. Sadly, this Hungarian film has been lost. From what I've read, the movie was about a woman having frightening visions after she visits an insane asylum where one of the inmates claims to be Dracula. But this is one of the few surviving stills. The earliest surviving Dracula movie is Nosferatu. A real estate man named Hunter, instead of Jonathan Hawker, goes over to Transylvania to sign a real estate deal with a strange man named Gelf Orlok instead of Count Dracula. But Orlok turns out to be a vampire and goes over to Germany instead of England to drain the blood from the living. Nosferatu is easily iconic, but I don't think it's amazing. Yeah, it does have some impressive directing and atmosphere, but I really don't like all the changes they made from the book. The design on Orlok is pretty good makeup-wise and is one of the few things that's true to the novel. One change from the novel that I actually did like was his shadow. It's very cool and some of the best that German Expressionism has to offer. The reason why it's called Nosferatu and not Dracula is that this was an illegally made movie. The director could not get the film rights from Stoker's widow, so he made some changes. But those changes would not go unnoticed. Stoker's widow sued, she won, and all the copies were supposed to be destroyed. Luckily, not all of them were destroyed. Nosferatu has been remade, and has a movie where the actor playing the vampire is actually a vampire. I give Nosferatu 3 stars out of 4. In the next decade to follow, the first Dracula movie to be legally made was produced by Universal Studios. Dracula was supposed to be played by Lon Chaney Sr. Sadly, Lon Chaney Sr. died of throat cancer around that time, so Universal Studios looked for a replacement. Out of all the actors that were considered, the last one on their list was a Hungarian actor named Bela Lugosi. Believe it or not, but the studio actually didn't want Bela Lugosi to play Dracula, even though he played Dracula many times on stage. The only way he could get the part was if he negotiated to get paid far less than what a regular actor would have gotten paid for the leading role. It was also ironic they decided to make this more of an adaptation of the stage version. But a lot of the characters from the novel are mixed up on what happens to them. Instead of Jonathan Hawker going to Transylvania, he's just Mina's fiancé in this one. Renfield's the one who goes to Transylvania and brings back Dracula to London. Dracula drains the blood from others, but 2 women named Lucy and Mina catch his interest. A man named Dr. Van Helsing will investigate and fight Dracula. Dracula is an amazing movie. Sure, it diverts from the book, but it's great in its own right. Being the first sound horror film, they didn't think to use any music, but what it uses as a great substitute is how the characters express their experiences.
And then I saw 2 red eyes staring at me, and a white, livid face came down out of the mist. It came closer and closer. I felt its breath on my face, and then its lips.
Another scene is when the undead Lucy walks silently at night, and it's just eerie to say the least. One standout performance is Dwight Frye as Renfield.
Rats. 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 Thousands. Millions of them.
He's just amazing. And it's sad that the studio typically typecasted him in either as a minor role or as a sidekick. The one performance that easily steals the show is Bela Lugosi as Dracula. His accent brings authenticity to the character, his dead stare shows how lifeless Dracula is, and you just can't keep your eyes off him every time he's on screen. Dr. Van Helsing is played by Edward Van Schloen, who is another actor that would be typecast in other iconic Universal monster movies. It may not have a soundtrack, but in the 90s, the studio released a version where original score was made, and it's amazing. Furthermore, it's my favorite classic Universal monster movie. I give Dracula 4 stars out of 4. Since they didn't have dubbing back then, it was common to create a Spanish version with an all Spanish-speaking cast. The Spanish version of Dracula has been regarded as superior to the Bela Lugosi one. Personally, I think that's hugely over-exaggerated. Here's why. For one, this movie's a lot longer than the Bela Lugosi one. Sure, it has some impressive directing, but the Bela Lugosi version is a lot better paced. The other thing is Carlos Vieira's as Dracula. Take this scene. Bela Lugosi wraps his cape around himself to show how cold and distant he is from the living. With Carlos Vieira's take on this scene, he walks up the stairs like he's constipated. Other than that, there's other scenes that do mirror the Bela Lugosi version, and it's interesting to see someone else's take, but it's just simply overrated. I give the Spanish version of Dracula 2.5 stars out of 4. After this one, there would be various sequels that had nothing to do with the Bram Stoker novel. So stay tuned next time where I review Horror of Dracula, the 1979 version of Dracula, and Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I am Dracula.